Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Lefevers from the Miami University Alumni Association, and I am excited to be joined today by Roger Sherman, Miami class of 2001, who will be sharing tips and tricks for perfecting your grilling techniques, which is perfect with Labor Day just around the corner. Roger is the owner of District Pit BBQ Catering in Washington, D.C., and we will start off by showing you how Roger grills a steak. So please note that this video we did film ahead of time just to make sure everything worked out well. It is a little bit blurry in the beginning, but you can still hear him fine, and it does smooth out as we go on. After the video, Roger will join us again and take some live questions. Just a reminder, you can submit these questions by using the Ask a Question button below the video, and I will read them aloud to Roger after we watch his recording. So I'm going to go ahead, play that video, stay with us, and we will bring Roger back for some live questions. Thank you.
All right, we're going to grill up some steaks for Labor Day. It's right around the corner. My name is Roger Sherman. I'm the pitmaster and owner of District Pit BBQ Catering Company in Washington, D.C., and a proud alumnus of Miami University 2001. So I'm not going to waste a whole lot of your time. We're going to get it right into it. We're going to cook up a steak today, and it doesn't require a lot of stuff. You got some meat, you got some fire, you got a couple of seasonings, and you get together with it. So we're just going to start with the fire because that's the most important part. So I've got a chimney full of charcoal here, and I'm just going to load that right in here. So that's going to fire up a little bit. Give it a little bit of time. Coals are already gray, so we'll just keep cooking here. I'm going to throw this top on it to keep the heat in. Now we're going to talk about this beautiful piece of meat here. When I'm grilling steak, I like to go ribeye. Ribeye is the best cut of steak for me. Personal opinion, if you like T-bones, if you like something else, that's fine. We're going to cook them all the same way, but this is how we're going to roll today. So we're going to start with some simple seasoning. I like to start with what they call a Dalmatian rub. It's salt and it's pepper. It's black and it's white, Dalmatian rub. We'll start with a little bit of salt here. You're going to drizzle it on top of the steak from about 10 inches above it so that it gets nice and easy. And you can be generous on the salt here. You can be generous on it. Salt you don't use, just put it on the side of the plate there. And we'll get to that again for the back side of it. Next piece, you're going to have some cracked back black pepper. I like to use kosher salt, by the way. Cracked back pepper. And we're going to be real generous with this. Now you got your salt and your pepper. Dalmatian rub. You can throw on a little garlic powder here and get the same deal. So it's still white, so you're still at the Dalmatian rub. Little bit of that there. And then the last piece, to transform it from a Dalmatian rub into something else, we're going to add some red pepper. And this is going to make it a newspaper rub because now it's black, white, and red all over. So you take your red pepper here, same deal. Don't be too generous with this, depending on who you're feeding. Just a little sprinkle of that. Give it a little pizzazz. And then you'll go ahead, flip the steak over, and do the exact same thing on the other side. We've got some of the seasonings here that we still had on the side here, some of the salt that we hadn't used. So we'll go ahead and use that on it. Get a little bit more salt. Again, 10 to 12 inches above, not over salting it. Like I said, you can go ahead and be generous with it. Got to go back to the pepper. You can be generous with that. And then a little bit of red pepper. Simple. Now, normally, I'd let this sit for 3 or 4 minutes just to get its crust on or however you do it. Another thing you can do is you can pick it up, and then the excess stuff that's on the plate, dab that in the sides and make sure you season the sides. Real easy. Get them on. That way, who's ever eating the ends of this, they're getting the same respect that the people eating the middle are. Then it gets pretty simple after this. You're going to put the fire under the meat. We've already got it going. Should be pretty hot already. We burned the coals up pretty good here. So you can see that they're good and gray. And then you're going to take your tongs. This steak is a little bit more than 1.5 inches thick. We're just going to lay it directly over top of the coals. I don't know if you might picked it up or not, but you'll get a good sizzle there. And then we're going to close it up. Now, we're going to take about 4 minutes aside here. So out of camera here, out of frame, I've actually got my timer set up. We're gonna go 4 minutes on it. 4 minutes is not gonna get it completely there. Obviously, we're gonna have to flip it over again so that it gets all the beauty and the marbling on both sides and the grill marks. It's gonna be super pretty. We're grilling today, but I'm really a barbecue chef. I like to cook indirect of heat. I like to cook big roast that take 8, 10, 12, 15 hours sometimes. Slice them up, pull them apart, put them out there for the people to eat. And most of the time, people are pretty happy. You get that low and slow involved in it, and you usually get a pretty good product. With that, it's important for everybody to understand that what we're doing here is not rocket science. Man has been cooking meat over fire for tens of thousands of years. This is not rocket science. You can do this. So you set up a fire, you put some meat over top of it, you pay attention to your temperatures, you watch the times, you too can be a grill master. I started grilling when I was a kid. My mother is from Kentucky, so there's a whole barbecue element there. We grew up in the District of Columbia. Not a ton of barbecue here. You get your chicken wings and your mumbo sauce, which is kind of like a barbecue sauce. You get a lot of crab cakes in this area, but it's not a real barbecue heavy area. If you go down the road, straight down I-95, you'll drive through Richmond and drive through North Carolina, Virginia Beach, get some great barbecue down there. But this isn't a super heavy barbecue region, the Washington, D.C. area. So we thought it was a good opportunity for us to try to elevate the palates of the people of the District of Columbia by coming in and giving that kind of old school Kentucky barbecue that I learned from my mom. Also picked up a lot of grilling. So my father is from the Bahamas. Not a lot of smoking down in the Bahamas because they're typically cooking with what we would call softwoods. So here, when you're doing barbecue, you typically want to cook up with a harder wood, like a oak and hickory and cherries and apple woods and all those different types of barbecue woods that you hear when you're watching the barbecue shows on television. Down in the Bahamas, they usually have wetter woods, pines, cedars, and stuff like that. If you smoke with that, you'll find yourself in a situation where your meat takes on a lot of soot if you cook it for a long time. So what they'll do down there is basically what we're doing here. Get a hot fire, get those sticks burning real hot, put the fish or the meat or whatever you're cooking directly over the grill, get it off of there as quick as you can. Most of the time when they're down there grilling fish, they're going to have meat over the fire for 6, 7 minutes at the most, as opposed to that 8, 10, 15 hours that we like to do, when we're doing barbecue. So that's kind of how I came up. We've been in the business here in Washington, D.C. for a little over 6 years now. The staples that we do your briskets, we do your chicken, we do ribs, we do beef ribs, we do pulled pork, all of your barbecue staples, and then we supplement that with a whole bunch of savory sides. Everybody loves mac and cheese. We actually smoke our mac and cheese. Everybody loves baked beans. We smoke our baked beans. We do grilled corn. We've got coleslaw. We've got mashed potatoes. We got potato salad. We got all the good staples that you would see at a good Thanksgiving feast or that you would see at a good summer barbecue. People ask me a lot of time, do I eat a lot of my own cooking? All the time. Anytime I'm preparing meals for a customer or doing a big event, I throw a little extra on there for myself and my family. Puts me in a position where I've got something to eat for the entire week. They call it meal prepping. I'm out there trying to do other things. I don't necessarily have a whole bunch of time to sit and cook myself a meal all the time. But when I'm cooking meals for other people, it gives me the opportunity to take advantage of that. So we are at the 4-minute mark now. Open this up so you can see the whole thing here. And we will now flip this bad boy over. You can see the smoke coming off of it here. You can see the grill lines on that. You can see that's coated right there, really nice. All right, so now that we flipped it, we're going to basically do the same thing. I flipped it over. It looks nice and pretty. Some people will take a second shot at seasoning it here. I don't really like to do that. I think that's kind of a waste of seasoning. If you season it correctly the first time, you don't really have anything to worry about. So we'll close that back up so that it gets good and hot in there again. And now we're just going to wait and count down another 4 minutes for you. So a lot of people will ask the question, Roger, that seems like a really short period of time. 4 minutes aside, it should take a lot longer to cook a ribeye. It does. This is not going to be an 8-minute cook. So we're going to sear this heavy, high heat, 4 minutes on each side. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to take it, we're going to move it off to the side, and then we're going to let it continue to cook in direct heat. That is called indirect cooking. A lot of people call this a sear and smoke. I like to call it a sear and smoke. That's what I do. Like I said, I'll get it right real hot on the other side. And what we could do some other times is we'll throw a couple of extra wood chunks on top of the wood as it continues to cook over, and then we'll get a little extra smoke in there. That's a good way to add a little extra flavor to your meat. So, a couple of other things that I like to talk about. When you are cooking your steak, it is important for you to understand the temperatures. Different degrees of the steak. Obviously, there's rare, there's medium rare, well done. You know, however you like your steak. I got a bunch of jokes about people who eat well done steak, eating shoe leather, eating bootstraps, or whatever you want to say about that. But at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is, how do you like your steak? If you like your steak medium rare, great. If you like it rare, great. I happen to like mine medium rare, a little closer to rare, but that's fine. If you come to my house and I am cooking steaks and you are asking me to cook it to well done for you, I will cook it to medium rare. Once it hits medium rare, you're responsible for your steak. I'm not gonna sit there and watch it burn. You can sit there and have the pleasure of watching it burn yourself when it's ready, and you've got your bootstrap leather. You can go ahead and consume that however you'd like to do it. What other meats do I really like to cook? What am I really good at? I think probably my best cook that I do for the business is ribs. I cook a ton of ribs a year. I probably cook, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 racks of ribs a year, and I do them in a way that's very simple. I would have liked to have done a rib demo for you today. It takes too long. Maybe one day we'll film it, we'll cut it down, and we'll put it up for the Miami alum to take a look at. But my ribs are pretty simple. I do it with a very simple rub, a little salt, a little pepper, a little garlic, a couple of other secret spices I'm not going to tell you about. I do pull the membrane off the back of the rib for those of you who are interested in that. You lay the rib indirect of the fire, and I just let it go on 225 to 250 degrees for somewhere between 3 and 4 hours. I'll come back, take a temperature check. If it's over 170 degrees, I'll go ahead and wrap it, put it back on the grill. I'll wrap it in foil so it maintains a whole bunch of additional moisture. And then after that, I'll pull it out, check the temperature. Should be somewhere between 195 and 202 degrees. And at that point, I think what you've got is a beautiful rack of ribs. Pull it off, let it sit there for about 20 minutes, let the moisture go back inside of the ribs, and then you'll just start cutting them up. And after that, people want to sauce them up. I don't ever sauce anything. I make a sauce. I'll provide you with beef, provide you with pork, provide you with chicken, whatever you want to eat, and then you'll be responsible for saucing that yourself. I think it's important that the meat tastes the way the meat is supposed to taste. Here's the good thing about barbecuing. Barbecue makes food taste the way food is supposed to taste. What do I mean by that? The gas oven is approximately 200 years old, less than that, 150 years old, somewhere in there. The electric oven is probably 100 years old. The microwave oven is 50 or 60 years old at this point. Fire is hundreds of thousands of years old. So if you're cooking directly over fire, you're guaranteed that your food is going to taste the way your food is supposed to taste. Barbecue is biblical. It's been around forever. If you're a religious person, if you follow the Bible, great. If you don't, you'll know this story anyway. When the prodigal son returned from all of his antics, his father said, "Kill the fatted calf and prepare my son a feast." Put shoes on his feet, put a ring on his finger, and he killed and prepared the fatted calf. They did not put the fatted calf in an oven. They put the fatted calf over a whole bunch of open coals like we're doing with this delicious piece of ribeye right now. So now, we're back to my ribeye. So I've cooked it on both sides for approximately 4 minutes. It looks really good, but I know that it's not done. Now, this is where it gets important. Time and temperature is important. If you're cooking, grilling, barbecue, you should have a meat thermometer. If you have a meat thermometer, you don't have to play games and guess when your meat is done. So I want this steak to be somewhere between 122 and 125 degrees internal temperature. Now, why do I want it that low? Great question. Because after the steak comes off, we're going to tent it in foil, and it's going to continue to cook. I want my steak to be medium rare. So if I pull it off at medium rare and then I wrap it to rest, it's going to make its way closer to done. We don't want that. So we're going to take a temperature read right now. My steak is 123 degrees. This is exactly where I would like it to be. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to let it go just a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slide the meat from over top of the fire just off to the side so it's still catching some of that indirect heat, and we'll continue just to cook a little bit longer. I'm only showing this to you right now so that you understand the process of the sear and smoke. So this was going to raise up. By the time I get it off here, it's probably going to be closer to 127 degrees, maybe even 128. We'll let this sit here for a little bit, and it's going to give the time for the juices to drain back into the meat. When the meat is directly over the fire, all those juices are being sucked out of it because of the heat. When you get it off of the heat, or indirected heat, some of those juices will start to settle back into the meat. This is called resting. Now, it is not actually resting at this point. What it's doing right now is continuing to smoke. And we're just going to leave it out here for just a couple of minutes, just so you can get an idea of how this works. While this happens, I'm going to switch out my plates. You saw that I brought a plate in. It had the raw meat on it, and then I season it on the plate. Obviously, that's not how you want to take it off. So we will introduce a clean plate with a very nice and large old hickory knife and fork that we will use shortly to cut into this delicious piece of beef. So what's the second best thing I do? It's brisket. Brisket is a big staple in barbecue. It's the hardest meat to cook. It's got a lot of inner fat marbling in it. If you get a good piece of it, it's going to take a long time. You know, your average brisket whole brisket weighs somewhere between 12 and 14 pounds. I actually like to get them about 16. If you're familiar with barbecue culture, there's the point and the flat on the brisket. I'll cook the whole thing, season it up, salt, pepper, garlic, after I've trimmed off most of the fat. I like to trim my briskets pretty lean. They say fat is flavor, but fat can also kind of get in the way if you don't know, where to cut it off of. There's certain parts of the brisket you got to cut the fat off. It doesn't matter. So I like to do those. And then you put it on the grill somewhere between 275 and 285 degrees. That's usually going to take you somewhere between 45 minutes a pound to an hour a pound. So most of the time, if I'm cooking a 15-pound brisket, I can get out of there somewhere around the 12-hour mark. So those are some of the staples that I like to put together. I probably cook about 10,000 pieces of chicken a year. That's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but, cooking is like fishing. You're always telling the bigger story. It always took you longer. You were always cooking a bigger piece of meat. You were always feeding more people. Just fed 200 people this past weekend. A nice family reunion up in Columbia, Maryland, about an hour north of the District of Columbia. Had a lot of hungry people. Got to the point where I thought I was going to run out of food. Luckily for me, I didn't. By the time everybody got through and everybody had a plate and a half, everybody was satisfied. I myself have been in those positions where I've been a little bit nervous that I'm going to run out of food. So I think we're in a good spot here. And that steak is probably now at that 125 degree mark, if I had to take a guess, which is right where I want it. So I don't know if the camera can see the thermometer, but I'm at 124.5 right now, and that is good enough for me. Again, if you want your steak a little bit more done, you can leave it on there a little bit longer. Now, this is important. The important part now is the tenting. Because I'm outside, I'm going to tent both of these. If I was inside, I would only tent one side on the plate, but we're going to do it out here like this so you can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to put foil on the plate here, and then we are going to rest the steak right on top of the foil. We can close off this fire now. We should be good with that. And then I am going to take another piece of aluminum foil and lay it right over the top and just kind of press it down. You don't need to wrap it up completely. If you wrap it up completely, it's going to cook a little bit faster. You don't really want it to cook right now. You really just want it to rest. Just sit there, let the juices flow back into it, and then give it the opportunity to be as delicious as it possibly can be. Now, typically with a steak this big, I would want to rest this somewhere between 7 or 8 minutes. Not going to hold you for 7 or 8 minutes here. We're going to rest this for just a little while, then I'm going to go ahead and cut into it because I'm good with that. I'll cut a little piece off so I can give it a taste. That's all I'm looking for. And then I'll actually leave the rest of it tented, so that when I take this inside and feed it to the rest of my family, they get a steak that has rested for an extended period of time. It's still going to be hot. It's going to be better than if you just cut into it right away. Again, what I was saying before, when you are cooking something over a flame, the moisture is making its way out of it. It's not all going to come out. Obviously, if you get it all out of it, that's your well-done steak, and it's going to be pretty dry. You're getting that bootstrap leather. If you give it the moment to rest, those juices that made its way to the surface start to work its way back into the meat and settle. And then you will be providing your customers with the juiciest piece of beef that you can possibly provide them. So, not a long rest here, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look. I will tent this for a little bit longer later, I promise. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and give it a slice. So, I will cut it right off of this tip here, because the people who live in my house like the middle of the steak, so the old man is just going to get the outside tip of it. And I'm going to bring this up to the camera. Oops. Where am I doing here? There you go. So you can see there's some pink in there, but that's how I like my steak. It is not raw. It is just below medium rare. I like to eat mine just on the closer side of rare. I'm sorry, the closer side of medium. Little bit of fat in this piece right here, but that's okay. It's because it's on the tip, and I'm going to go ahead and take a bite here. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you cook steak. That's all I got for you guys today. Now let's take some questions.
All right, and we are back live. Thank you, Roger. That was great, and we had a lot of questions come in, so people are very curious and want to know everything about grilling. So the first question that came in is the reason for the generous seasoning to create a crust given the lack of flavor within the meat?
So anybody who would make a comment about there being a lack of flavor in steak, maybe they just don't like steak. I think that beef is plenty favorable, but yes, for the generous amount of seasoning, a couple of things. You're going to lose a little bit of seasoning in the grill. Some of it's going to fall over when you first put it on. When you flip it to the other side, you're going to lose a little bit. So, you know, the more seasoning you can put on there without seasoning it, yes, it will create that crust. It'll lock in some of the additional flavor, and honestly, it's just a prettier presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's see. Where are we? Okay. And then someone wants to know, and you may have a lot of suggestions, but maybe like your top two for smoking brisket.
Smoking brisket. The top two suggestions that I would give you for smoking brisket is I like to inject brisket, add a little bit of additional flavor, a little bit of moisture. So if you can get some beef broth or some phosphates, that's a good way to do brisket. And then it's going to be the temperature control. I cook my temperature a little bit higher than a lot of people do. I'm not a hot and fast guy. I'm kind of in between low and slow and hot and fast. So I like to cook around 275 to 285 degrees on my brisket. And if you can maintain the temperature, the temperature at that consistency all the way throughout, you'll be fine. The other piece that I would tell you is same thing with I said with the ribs. When you get to that 170, 172 degree internal for the brisket, you can pull it off the smoker, wrap it in aluminum foil or wrap it in butcher paper, depending on, where you're from, what region of the country you're from, or, whatever is available to you. And then you put it back on the smoker and let it go for a little bit longer. I typically pull my briskets between 203 and 205 degrees. And then again, the resting for this. So if I rest the steak 7 or 8 minutes, you got to rest the brisket, 4 or 5 hours. So you just keep that wrapped up, let it rest, and then when you slice into it, it'll still be warm and it'll be quite juicy.
So kind of in the same vein, how do you prevent overcooking? Not just of brisket, but of steaks, of anything you're smoking?
Yeah, preventing overcooking is really simple. Get a thermometer. If you have a digital thermometer and check the temperatures of your meat consistently, you'll never get to the point where you overcook them. So if you're just cooking steaks, you can have just one of those handheld digital thermometers like I had. Take a temperature read when you think you're close to done. If you're cooking something that is going to be a much longer cook, your briskets, your pork shoulders, stuff like that, I would suggest that you get one of those digital thermometers that have the Bluetooth capabilities that maybe go to your phone. That way you can monitor the internal temperature of the meat without having to open your grill multiple times to check the temperature. If you have one of those and you can keep your temperatures between X, Y, and Z, whatever type of meat you're cooking for, you'll prevent overcooking. Another trick you can do is you can put something that's moist inside of the grill. A lot of people will use a water pan and stuff like that. It'll add additional moisture to the grill, and that helps to prevent overcooking as well. But the more important piece is going to be the thermometer.
Okay, thank you. And people want to know, what's your preference for a smoker? Do you have a brand that you prefer for personal use?
So for my big smoker that I use for my catering events is a custom made grill. I use that the most more than anything else. I am an offset firebox smoker. So for those of you who don't know what that means, there's usually a big chamber where you'll put all the meat inside of it. And there's a smaller chamber where you'll put your wood and your charcoal, and they never come into contact with each other. That's the type of smoker that I like to cook on. If you're looking for one of those, I'm not being endorsed by these guys. I would love an endorsement. But I do like Oklahoma Joe. They make a pretty good smoker. They have one called the Longhorn and one called the Highlander. I would suggest that you get the Longhorn. It's the bigger one. I think if you're going to cook for a lot of people, having that additional surface area is always good. But don't get the Longhorn. There's two models of it. Get the one that's completely a smoker. There's another one that's half a smoker, then half a gas grill. Don't get the one that's a half a gas grill. The reason why is because the smoke chamber ends up being too small, and the firebox is too big for the smoke chamber, and you'll end up burning stuff up. So get the one that's a whole smoker. Don't combine the two.
Well, that answered our next question.
Hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Let me go back one real quick. You don't need a smoker to smoke meat. All you need is a kettle grill. So go and get a Weber kettle grill. You can get one for $100 if you go into Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that. That's all you need for smoking for a family of 6 to 8. Or even 10, you could smoke a whole meal for people on a Weber kettle grill. So don't go out and spend $400 or $500 on a smoker, when you can spend $100 and get a nice kettle grill and do the same thing.
I wish that my husband would have listened to this before going out and buying our smoker.
I'm sure he's doing just fine, though. I'm sure he's doing just fine.
Okay, so you answered the question then: charcoal or gas, and why not gas? That kind of answered that.
Well, I said not to combine them. So let me touch on charcoal and gas real quick. So charcoal, and in my case wood, I like to cook with charcoal and wood, is going to be far superior. And I alluded to this in the video. Because wood fire and smoke is hundreds of thousands of years old. That is how meat was meant to be cooked. If you've got a gas grill on your back patio and you're grilling steaks that's making your family happy, and that's good for you, fine. But if you want to get a deeper level of flavor, if you want to enjoy the cook a little bit more, there's a lot of enjoyability to cooking with charcoal and wood, because you have to monitor the fire, and there's an element of I don't know, I guess, some fun to that. You get out there, you need it to be 250, you need it to be 275, you need it to be, 225. You don't just go out there and turn a dial. You got to open and close dampers. You got to put a little bit of wood in. You got to, do it. It's just, there's more science to it. So it's more fun to do it that way. But charcoal and wood far superior to the gas grill. I have a gas grill. It's out on the patio. It's good for doing other stuff. Like if I'm outside, cooking, 4 or 5 hours worth of ribs, and I've still got to make the mac and cheese. If I need to melt down the cheese sauce instead of going inside and utilizing an oven, you can use the burners as kind of like an outdoor stove. So it has its purposes, but it doesn't have very many purposes.
So then someone wants to know, and I don't think you answered this question with that, but maybe they want to know the difference between coal and wood pellets when it comes to smoking, which one you prefer.
So good question. So I do not like to cook with pellet smokers. There's nothing wrong with pellet smokers. They're really good for you. If you don't have the time to sit and monitor a grill, it's one of those things where you can kind of like set it and forget it, and it'll do all the work for you. The reason why I don't like pellet grills is because the pellet grills are ground super fine. So when you smoke with a pellet grill, you're getting a really, really consistent burn out of them, which is a good thing. But the bad thing about that is because they don't flame up or fire up at all, you don't get as much smoke flavor associated with that. So you end up eating a meal that kind of tastes like it was cooked in an oven, because there's no additional smoke flavor that you get to it from your flare ups and stuff like that. So there's nothing wrong with the pellet grill, but I like to cook with charcoal and wood because I think there's more flavor imparted.
Okay, we have a lot more questions coming, or to ask, but kind of getting away from the meat questions for a second. Somebody had a question about vegetarian and vegan options. Do you have any that you recommend for grilling?
So I get this question more often than I could have ever believed, and I believe that I'm being trolled by my fraternity brothers right now, who I know are watching this and would probably put such a question in there because they know that I don't really do that. I get questions about vegetarian fare all the time. I don't offer a ton of vegetarian. A lot, if you're a vegetarian and you're calling me, I don't really understand why you're calling me. I'll still take your business. I'll cook for you whatever I can, but I don't have a whole bunch of vegetarian staples. Now, all of my sides are typically vegetarian. Like, we don't load up the baked beans with meats or anything like that. We used to put bacon in the macaroni and cheese. We don't do that anymore. Obviously, you could eat the coleslaw. We grill corn and stuff like that, but we don't have any specific vegetarian entrees. I do like to saute some of the vegetables. Like I'll fire up a cast iron skillet, put that over top of the fire, and saute my red onions, green onions, yellow onions. Peppers, and then onions. That I use for some of the other dishes that I put together, and you get an element of smoke flavor on those, and it's a deeper level of flavor. But I'm not out there grilling asparagus or anything like that. I wish I was. I could probably step my game up and be a better chef if I did that, but I don't do that.
They may have come from your fraternity brothers.
I'm sure.
At the emails and the names, they may have been. So kind of in that same line, the best way to grill veggies, would you suggest using a cast iron skillet? What about skewers, pan, tin foil?
Yeah, skewers. I would just suggest skewers, but really, honestly, I'm just making it up. Do what you like with your vegetables. I mean, if you want to put them on a skewer, good for you. I do them in a cast iron skillet directly over the fire. That's the easiest thing for me to do. That way you don't have to worry about them falling through the grates and stuff like that. I know a lot of people who will intentionally let vegetables fall through the grates because they think that the aroma associated with the burning vegetables imparts additional flavor into the meats. There's probably some truth to that. I don't happen to do that, but I'm sure there's some truth to it. But yeah, I would just go cast iron skillet directly over the fire.
Okay. Moving away from that, how is Kentucky style barbecue different from other areas of the country, if it is different?
So here's where I'm going to get myself in a little bit of trouble. I don't think that barbecue is different in the different regions. Meat over top of fire is pretty universal. That's what barbecue is. So the difference is regionally is typically whatever type of rub or whatever type of sauce you use. So you'll hear people talk about a North Carolina sauce that is usually vinegar based. You'll hear about the Kansas City sauce, which is basically molasses based. Texas is usually just salt and pepper rubs with no sauce. Same thing with Memphis. They're usually just dry rubs. Kentucky would fall into that same type of Tennessee barbecue, but they're doing a lot of hams. Old Kentucky hams is the big thing that they're smoking out there. That's what my mom kind of got me hooked on when I was younger. So, that's all I would say. I think barbecue is pretty universal. The way out in California, they're doing smoking on Santa Maria grills and calling it something different. It's the same thing. It's meat over top of fire. And as long as you're able to control the temperature and bring your meat up to the appropriate temperature for that particular meat, it's just barbecue is barbecue.
Okay. Your friends are making me laugh with their questions. So of the various types of meat that you cook, which requires the greatest amount of skill and attention? And then also you could add to that, someone wants to know what's the most unusual thing that you've smoked before.
I'll touch on the hardest piece of meat that I cooked, and I alluded to this in the video. The hardest barbecue staple to cook, I would say, is brisket. Because it takes a lot of time. Beef is usually pretty lean, and you can dry it out pretty quickly. So you really got to be careful with that. I think the most exotic thing that I've ever smoked is alligator. So that is an interesting texture. You'll hear people say that alligator tastes like chicken. It kind of does a little bit, but it really has the kind of consistency of like a calamari. So it's kind of rubbery. So you got to really sear that off really hard. You kind of grill smoke it. It's the same sear and smoke that I was talking about with the steak. You'll get alligator pieces and you can put them on skewers. I use my skewers for meat and not vegetables, but if you want to put vegetables on your skewer, feel free. But I'll put the alligator on those, put it directly over the fire, get it good and hot for 3 or 4 minutes, flip it over 3-4 minutes, and then take it off to the side and let that come up to that 100, 140, 145 degree mark. Alligator makes a really good sandwich. I think the most difficult piece of meat I've ever cooked was something that I just wanted to try. And then now I've done so many of them that it's actually part of my menu is beef shoulder clawed. If you're familiar with the anatomy of a cow, the brisket is the cow's pectoral muscle. The shoulder clawed is, again, the shoulder. So it's going to encompass all 3 heads of the deltoid, the trapezius muscles, a lot of the latissimus dorsi, and then a lot of the tricep of the cow. It's a big working muscle. Does not have a whole lot of inner fat marbling, and they are huge. So I mentioned that the average brisket weighs somewhere between 12 and 14 pounds, but the average shoulder clods weighs somewhere between 30 and 33 pounds. So it's more than twice the size. First time I cooked one of these, I cooked a 36-pound beef shoulder clod, and it took me roughly 24 hours to bring it up to that 205 degree mark. It was a long time. You're going out there every 3 or 4 hours, loading up the charcoal, making sure you put enough wood on it to have it burn down slowly. It was a fun cook. Now I know how to do it. It's not a big deal for me. I can get through them, usually in 14, 15 hours because I know how to cook them a little bit better. But it's a great piece of meat. Ends up pulling apart, very easily, just like a pork shoulder, and it makes a better sandwich. You don't see that at all on the East Coast here. I'm probably the only person to do it in DC. You'll see a lot of them in Texas, but that's probably the most difficult piece of meat that I cook consistently. But gator is great. Gator's terrific.
Speaking of gator, do you cook a lot of seafood and fish?
Yeah.
I don't know if gator would be considered seafood, but do you cook a lot of fish?
I cook a lot of fish. So we cook a ton of salmon. We cook a ton of trout. Those are the 2 fish that we do the most of. I just did salmon, 3 or 4 weeks ago for like 200 people. That's a good cook. Smoked salmon is delicious. It really doesn't get any better than that. It's a really simple cook. Doesn't take a lot of time. You can usually get it out of there in about 3 or 4 hours. Usually probably less than that, probably 2.5 to 3. You can also do a cold smoke on salmon. That's a show for another day. We could talk about that later, but salmon is the big one. So we do a ton of fish. We do more fish than I could have imagined that we would have done.
Okay, so you mentioned this too about shredding the meat that you cooked. Someone said, I never get my pulled pork right on the big green egg smoker. Comes out like a roast and does not shred. What am I doing wrong? What internal temp do you need to hit so it shreds? Yeah,
so that's probably, you're probably just taking it off early. You might be running the fire a little hot. I've never cooked. I've never smoked on a ceramic cooker like a Big Green L. I've grilled on them, but I've never smoked on one. The thing about the green egg that is great is it's really good at maintaining temperature. It does not require a lot of food because the way the construction of it is such that it maintains heat really well. So if you accidentally get your big green egg too hot, 310, 325 degrees, it's difficult to bring it back down. So that might be one thing that you're doing. You might have your temperature too high, and then you might be pulling it off too early. So I pulled pork. I pull pork off the smoker between 203 and 205 degrees, and same thing with brisket. Once I get to 170, 175 degrees internal temp, I'll wrap them and then bring it up to 203, 205 degrees. In the wrap, you should be able to at that point grab the bone, the blade, the shoulder blade, and it should pull right out clean. That is how you know. If you pick it up and it tugs and it doesn't pull, just wrap it back and put it back on the smoker. Then it'll pull apart for you. But 203 to 205 is the number.
So speaking of that temperature, then how can you maximize temperature control using a traditional kettle grill, as opposed to the smoker or a Big Green or Komodo Joe grill?
Good question. So the easiest way to do that is a method called the minion method. So you can take your smoker, your kettle grill, you kind of divide it in half visually. If you noticed in the video, I had a little metal pan in there that holds the charcoal that had holes in it to let air come through. You can turn that to the side and move it off to the side and use that as a blocker. And then you just put like a chimney or a chimney and a half full of unlit charcoal in the bottom of the grill. And then you'll go back and light a quarter chimney of charcoal and get that fired up and pour that over the top of it. And that will make it burn down slow. So you don't get this big, huge flare up where it jumps over 300 degrees or anything like that. It'll burn down slow. If you put that much charcoal in it and let it burn and nothing, if all the meat is on the other side indirect of it, you can burn in a kettle grill for over 8 hours without having to put any additional fuel into it. I've actually burned as long as 12 in a kettle grill with no problem. The other secret to it is the dampers at the bottom. If you're cooking on a kettle grill, they have the old school ones that were in the 80s and 90s that had the 3 different dampers on the bottom, the 3-hole circle dampers on the bottom. Most of them don't have that anymore. They have a big ashtray pan with a big lever that opens and closes the dampers. Get on your back, lay down and look up. And when it's completely black, they're completely covered. Take a marker and put a mark where that lever is, and then open it up halfway, put another mark, and then open it up another little bit so it's 3/4, and just mark off where those are so you can see from when you're standing over top of the grill, when the grill is closed, how much air you're letting into it, and then measure it that way. That way you can maximize temperature control. You won't get a ton of flare-ups.
All right, and we just have a few more questions before we wrap up. Someone wants to know, are you taking any innovative approaches with your cooking? Anything new you're trying?
So there a couple of things. There's not a lot of innovation to barbecue. Like I said, this is pretty simple. I mean, it's meat over top of fires. But I do have a couple of partnerships in DC that have given me the opportunity to try a couple of other things. I pair with a couple of wineries in Virginia. Perriman Cellars is one of them that I do a lot of business with. They've got great wines. So I've started to do a couple of things where I infuse some of my meats with different types of wines. If you had seen me cooking a steak over top of, on a cast iron over top of the grill, I would have deglazed the pan with different types of wine. That's not really innovative. It's not really new. But some of the things that I'll do with the different types of wines that they have are kind of fun. You can reduce them down and kind of use them as like a glaze for some of your meats and stuff like that. You don't see a ton of that in barbecue. You see that in different restaurants around the world, high-end restaurants, but you don't see a ton of that in barbecue. So I've started to play around with that a little bit. I got another partner who I do business with, Catoctin Creek Distillery, and we'll use some of their whiskeys and some of the sauces or some of the beans. Again, that's not new or anything like that, but we will take some of their whiskeys and use it in our drip pan. And like I mentioned, the additional moisture that you can get from a drip pan in a smoker, rather than putting it in water, put some whiskey in there and see if you can infuse some different flavors that way. The other things that I'm trying to do, it's not really based on cooking, but it's based on the pairings. So I mentioned the winery that I do business with. We do barbecue and wine pairings now, which is a little bit newer to the DC area. I know you see that in some other places, but it's not something that you see a lot of here. So we've got, what we put together is we'll go out there and they'll pair a different flight of wine with the 3 different meats we might provide them with, and do a whole bunch of different pairings like that. We do that with the whiskeys, with the distilleries as well. So, like I said, it's not really different, but it's something different for us. It's something new for us, and it's an opportunity for us to, reach out and grab a different type of clientele.
I think that sounds super fun and something we should do for our alumni in the DC area.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, yeah, we could definitely do that. What we do with the alumni here in the DC area, there's a great bar that I partner with also called Metro Bar, and we do a whole bunch of Miami centric stuff up there, which is kind of neat. Those guys are great too. But we come out and do a good old barbecue for the alumni. But if the alumni in the DC area would like to come and do a wine and barbecue pairing, we'd love to have you.
Yeah. I'll talk with you about setting that up, because that sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, 2 more questions. How to grill thick steak fillets without burning the outside and leaving the inside rare?
So when you burn the outside, not burn the outside, when you char the inside and leave the inside rare, that's actually called black and blue. Some people call it Pittsburgh style. That is an actual style of cooking. So if you accidentally do that, cut the steak open, tell people you cook it Pittsburgh style, and they'll be impressed by that, even if you did it by accident. But a good way to avoid charring the outside and having a rare inside is to do what they call a reverse sear. So it's going to be the exact opposite of what I showed you in the video. In the video, I went directly over the fire, flipped it directly over the fire, and then moved it off to the side and gave it some time to heat up and smoke that way. You would do it the exact opposite. You would get your grill kind of hot, 320 to 350 degrees, put your meat off to the side and let it stay there, not direct over the fire for 20 to 30 minutes, or if you're looking at the temperature, which is what you should be doing, pay attention to the temperatures. You'll get that meat up somewhere between 120 and 123 degrees. And then after that, that's when you're going to get the char on the outside, the grill mark. So you'll move it back open directly over the fire. When you open the grill up, you could leave it open. That's going to let a lot of air rush in and crank that fire up to 450, 500 degrees, which is where you want to be at when you're searing those steaks. Sear them nice. 2 minutes aside at that point should probably do it. You'll be in that 127 degree range. Then take it off, wrap it like I showed you before, and you'll avoid, charring the outside of it and leaving the inside rare. That's a good steak. When you cut it open, it's really pretty.
Okay, 2 more questions. I lied before. Sure. Sorry. One more came in. That's really good.
I got time.
Okay, so this one is if you didn't defrost your meat, can you cook frozen burgers, steak and chicken on a grill? And do you have tips for that?
Sure. If you're cooking burgers, if you're about to cook a burger, take it, warm it up in the microwave, feed it to your dog. We don't want you eating hamburgers. You can do way better than hamburgers. I want you eating ribeye steaks. But if you do have a hamburger that is frozen, yeah, you can throw a frozen patty right on top of the grill and have no problem with that. Chicken, I would avoid doing that. You really want to get your chicken thawed out and seasoned up appropriately. So if you take a frozen piece of chicken and you try to throw it out there, yeah, it'll cook, but your seasoning is not going to adhere to it. It's all going to fall off, roll into the grill. So you don't want to do that. So if you've got your frozen hot dogs and hamburgers and you want to throw them on the grill, fine, do that. But anything else, chicken, fish, if you buy that frozen, you want to grill it up, take the time to thaw it out. It is not a good idea to put that on the grill raw, because none of your seasoning will adhere to it, and you'll end up eating a piece of bland meat.
Perfect. Thank you. I can hear my coworker Seth upstairs listening, and he just laughed at the hamburger part.
You don't want hamburgers. You don't want hamburgers. I got issues with hamburgers that I get into here.
Okay, so this is our last-ish question. I have a couple things just to promote yourself
Sure.
at the end. But you mentioned learning your grilling skills initially from your mother. Is there anything that you cook now because of her, or that was a favorite of hers?
Yeah, so she's probably watching this. This is going to get me in some trouble. So the best dish that my mother used to make is chili. When I was a kid, my mother made the best chili. So when I started barbecuing and stuff like that, I started smoking chili. So I called my mother and I asked her for her chili recipe. She gave it to me. And then I took it kind of to the next level. So, she does a ground chuck chili with, a bunch of vegetables and beans and stuff like that. I don't put beans in my chili. I use 3, sometimes 4 different kinds of meat, smoked meat in my chili. So I'll smoke chicken, smoke brisket, smoke pulled pork, and maybe even chuck roast, cut it all up, put it in the pot, put the vegetables in there, put the chili sauce in it and put it out on the smoker. Leave it out there. The whole chili process to me could take 14, 15 hours. It's a really long process. I'm really proud of this chili. My mother doesn't think my chili is chili. She doesn't. She thinks that my mother thinks that my chili is not chili because it does not have beans. I think the chili is really good. It sells really well. We don't do as much of it in the summer or in the spring as we do, but it's a big popular product that we do in the fall. I'm not going to shout my mother down and scream to the heavens that I'm actually making chili here when she says it's not, but I think it's chili. But that's the one dish that I took from my mother completely and totally, and then just tried to elevate it a little bit more. My mother makes spectacular chili.
Being from Cincinnati and thoroughly enjoying Skyline chili, which I will not compare to your chili, but not all good chili has to have beans.
No,
I agree with you.
I agree. Yeah.
So before we go, We want to know, do you do live classes? Do you have social media where you're showing cooking tutorials? Where can
Sure.
people find you? How can they follow you? And how can, if they're in the DC area, get in touch with you to cater something?
Sure. So if you want to get in touch with us, the easiest way to get in touch with us is our website. It's thedistrictpit.com. We're also on Facebook at The District Pit and on Instagram at District Pit. If you're watching this, please follow us today. That would make us really happy. I haven't done a ton of tutorials. I have people that I'm cool with who will come over to the kitchens and they'll grill with me sometimes, and I like to teach that way. But this is the first type of real live session that I've done. So this has been fun. So I think I'll definitely do some more of these. We do have a YouTube channel. It's called Pit Perspective. So if you go on YouTube, check us out at Pit Perspective. Follow us there. We have a whole bunch of grilling tutorials. I talked about really wanting to show you guys how to do ribs. Ribs is on there. If you go on there, there's a great steak demo that I do in a cast iron skillet. We've got a brisket demo on there. We've got a chicken demo on there. My origin story barbecuing is with turkeys. That's how I started my business. We started doing our business just doing holiday turkeys and hams. So I got a great turkey tutorial on there. And we also do some small interviews, some short interviews with people in the area around food interest and drink interest and stuff like that. So check us out, thedistrictpit.com, The District Pit on Facebook, at District Pit on Instagram, and Pit Perspective on YouTube. We'd love for you guys to check us out there.
Well, thank you, Roger. This has been great. We thank you for your time today. We thank you for everything that you do for Miami. I know you cater our student send-offs. And we look forward to hopefully being able to engage you more in the future, because we'd love just to do more with you, because so many people really enjoyed this.
Great. I would love to do it again. If you do go on the website, I mentioned I have issues with hamburgers. I have a video on there. It's only about 2 minutes long about all of my issues with hamburgers. It's one of the 2 or 3 first videos on there. So go check that out. You'll understand exactly why I cannot stand hamburgers.
Seth and I will have to watch. We'll have to watch that after.
Please do.
He liked that comment. Okay, so thank you again, Roger. Thank you to all of you that tuned in today. We invite you to check out our other upcoming webinars by visiting alumlc.org/MiamiOH. We have a lot more just in the month of September, but then also throughout the rest of the year. They are free and open to everyone, so go ahead and register for those. Have a great rest of your day. Make sure you follow Roger on social media and check out his videos and tutorials. Again, love and honor.